So today we are joined by the incredible chartered financial planner Helen Howcroft, a true leader in financial planning, known for her relentless work ethic, her straight talking approach, and a commitment to empowering clients, particularly women navigating major life changes. She is a true force in our industry. Beyond finance, she is a proud Welsh mother of 2 teenage boys, a rugby fan, a lover of wine, and she enjoys travel. So welcome, Helen.
Oh, thank you very much.
You like that? Are you practicing that?
Nailed it.
I'll have to get you to write my bio for work.
No pressure now.
So, first of all, thank you for being here. I'm honoured that you are here because I know you're so busy. And how we heard about you is from a mutual friend of ours, Steph. And she was like, Tracy, Emma, you're going to have to meet Helen. You'd be so inspired. And when she was telling us about your journey as to how you came into this industry and why you came into the industry and where you currently are and where you want to be, we were like, you have to share this story to us because more and more women need to hear about this. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So where did it all start, Helen?
Oh gosh,
Take
here
us
we
back.
go. All right, take it all back. So it goes back to a farm in South West Wales. But my background to my story is that my parents died when I was quite young. My father died of multiple sclerosis when he was 29. He was only ill with it for 18 months. He had the aggressive type of MS, because there's 2 types you can get. And then my mother, unfortunately, died a few years later. When I was 10, she died of cancer. So from the age of 10, I was brought up by my grandparents. And I often say I was really fortunate being brought up by my grandparents because they were all pre-war, pre-depression babies, and they understood the value of money. And so I had it ingrained from the start that looking after your money and thinking about the future was really, really important, because they knew what it was like living through the war and the depression with no money whatsoever. And being farmers, they could put food on the table, but only having one set of clothes and things like that certainly teaches you a lot of things growing up. But being brought up by very Victorian type grandparents, a woman was expected to be in the home. As children, you're expected to be seen and not heard. It was quite a challenging, difficult time, and certainly boys were treated differently than the girls around the house.
Yeah. And what was it that made you? Was there a point in your life where you thought, I want to be a financial planner? Or as we've discussed in the podcast a couple of times, a lot of financial advisors say they've fallen into the industry. What was it for yourself?
Yes, I was actually very much the former. So when my mum had cancer, we had an amazing, my grandfather had an amazing financial advisor, a guy called Dick Jones. Remember him well, with his moustache. He'd sit there smoking a cigar in the house. It's just, you go back, it's incredible. But when my mum had cancer, I was 10, and I remember being sat in the lounge with my mum, my grandfather, the financial advisor, and the accountant and the solicitor. And I remember Dick just speaking to my mum and my grandfather, really wanting to find out what she wanted to achieve for me and my brother, and what she wanted our futures to look like, and what she wanted the money to mean. And so based on that, the accountant was able to advise on the tax planning side, and very much Dick was the orchestrator and making sure that everyone did everything, and giving my mum that reassurance that when she did pass, that we would be fine. And I just remember, even at the age of 10, being in that meeting, not having a clue what trusts were and all of the things they were talking about, but just coming away and just feeling that my mum felt felt happy about things. And it was only then later in life, and again coming through, my grandfather expected me to become a farmer's wife. So I went on to I trained to become a qualified secretary, but he didn't want me to go to university. So I funded myself through going to university, and I did that by working for financial advisors. And so when I was looking to get a job, it was, going into finance seemed to be the appropriate thing because I'd had it installed from the start. And obviously doing the family books, I did the family accounts for both sets of grandparents because we were all farmers. So I'd help both sets of grandparents doing the accounts every month. So I was very much used to doing profit and loss accounts from the age of 10. I could drive a tractor at the age of 10. I couldn't lift a bale, but I could drive a tractor. But I remember, certainly as a teenager, at the age of 11 and 12, I was doing the company accounts for my grandparents, and then going through university, then working for financial advisor. But the job I worked at in the summer holidays, I used to meet all of the broker consultants coming in, and I used to think, what an amazing job that your job is to go around and to speak to all of the different financial advisors and then take them out for lunch. What a great job. So that's how I got into working in finance, was really looking, seeing the impact it had on us, and then funding myself through university. And then when I graduated, I actually did my dissertation on the computer systems in the car insurance industry, because the advisors I worked with had insurance brokers and financial advisors. They did pensions at the same time. So I did my dissertation on that, and then I think I finished uni on the Friday and I started at Legal & General on the Monday, and I went straight into working in Cardiff for L&G.
That's amazing, isn't it? That actually, I suppose, going right back to, like you say, that meeting where your mum and your grandfather decided to include you at 10. That's very young, but actually quite a big defining moment in your life, because you sat in on that meeting and saw how well the financial planner was doing his job and actually looking after your mum. Quite an inspirational moment.
You've seen it firsthand.
Seen
it firsthand.
It was probably, they couldn't keep me out of the room, was probably the truth. I was that nosy. I was that nosy person. It was always, and again, that's what I think makes a really good financial planner, that if you're genuinely interested in other people, I think that really naturally makes you a really good financial planner, because you want to know more about them. And then I think that's what then helps you become a really good coach, because you want to be asking all of those extra questions to really get under their skin, to really understand what money means for them. But it was me being nosy.
But it shows your personality really then, and that's probably how you've developed, even at 12 doing the books. That's incredible. I couldn't do those myself now. Even, so you've obviously had quite a drive from quite a young age to do well, even though your granddad was more maybe traditional in terms of expecting, because you were a woman or a girl back then, to go down a certain path. What was it in you that made you think, actually, no, there's more to what I want to be doing?
That's a really interesting question. My mum was running her own business after my father had died. So I actually think that being brought up by people who are self-employed, you have that natural instinct, because there isn't the regular paycheck coming in, and it's very much you eat what you kill kind of thing.
You have to be innovative in, right then, how can I bring money in rather than getting a job? You think differently.
So I've always think that I've said this several times in the past, where my grandfather never had a pension, but he had sheep, and he understood where every sheep fitted into the whole, what needed to be paid for. But then equally, this is where, my grandfather, we're talking about women especially, I was 13 and the school ski trip came available, and my brother 2 years before had been allowed to go on the school ski trip, but I wasn't allowed to go. And the justification that my grandfather gave was because my brother ultimately didn't go because the day before he was due to leave, he fell ill with mumps. So it got cancelled, but it'd all been paid for. That was the excuse, the real reason. He didn't want to be spending money on me, wasting money on a ski trip when he thought it was irrelevant for a woman to be doing it. But to teach me a lesson, instead what we did was I had a day I bunked off school. We went to the sheep sale, the Texel sheep sale in Bilf, and I was able to spend what would have been spent on the school ski trip. Right. And I was able to buy as many lambs as I could for that price. And I walked away with 2 Texel female, 6-month-old lambs at the sales. And then a year later, we sold the 2 lambs, and then whatever they were sold for went into my bank account as a deposit for a future property purchase.
God, so you were learning about money from a very young age. Yeah. Do you think that's had quite an influence in the way you manage money yourself now and the way you do your job?
Well, I don't ski. If that has anything to do with it.
I've got 1,000 sheep now.
I do not ski, and when I look at a budget planner, I can see if someone goes skiing by the amount of money they spend on holidays.
It's not cheap.
So yeah, I definitely do think about the future, and I definitely plan. And but even I know I'm jumping around here because we'll come on to this about my divorce and things. But thinking about planning, one of the other people on the podcast works with a lady called Michelle Hoskin, Little Miss Wow, and I remember going and listening to her speak in January 2016, and I'd just left my husband at this point, and she stood there and said, how can you be as advisors planning for your clients if you don't know where your future is going? So, and at that point I actually wrote myself a 30-year life plan.
Did you?
Okay. Yeah, and even to the point that at the age of 60, where I wanted to go on holiday, and at the age of 55 and 50, and I remember, so I would have been 41, no, what was I then? Was it 40? So that would have been, I would have been 41 at the time. And I remember thinking, when I'm 45, I want to take the boys to Borneo. And it was probably a year later I sat there and I thought, why am I waiting till I'm 45 to take the boys to Borneo? Do it now. I've updated that and updated something else on the life plan. But for me, planning really is in my blood because I want to know where I'm going.
And you've got a focus.
Yeah, my holidays are planned to the future. That they are planned so that you work hard because there's a get-off point at some point in the future to have that break.
Yeah, I think that there's not enough people out there that plan. I've always been a planner since a young age as well. I've always in my head, when I was younger, it was all about assets. I want a nice car, I'd like a house at this age. Now it's develop it. Travel actually is a big thing for me as well. I think I'd like to see the world, and I think it really broadens your mind to things personally. But it's actually more about, I suppose, the touchy-feely things in my plans now and what I'm aiming for. But I go into schools and universities and things and talk about having a plan, a life plan, and I think it really does, like Tracy says, just focuses your mind in, and you actually see your progress then, don't you? Yeah. And you can look back and see what you've achieved and whether you've achieved those goals. Have you found that you've been on track over the years? Yeah,
absolutely. But I think what this also enabled me to do is really think about what I'm doing outside work. Because if you are working, long hours, and as working mums, you are juggling so much more than the day job. And, yes, I don't have to organise play dates anymore. And, yes, I've been very fortunate that I've been in a position where I had au pairs. I wouldn't have been able to have children in London without having au pairs. They've been a godsend. But actually working long hours, you get so stuck in a rut of working that if you don't plan, you don't actually then have those what was the point. So then enabling me to to plan has enabled me to then go, what am I actually wanting to do with the boys over the next 12 months? And especially, I know your children are younger, but having teenage boys, it isn't anymore that you go, oh God, I've got a play date or I've got to take them for whatever. Now they're at the point, they just want to be with their mates. And then you go, but what am I going to do with you? And so it actually really enables you to plan like that so that you don't end up at the end of 2025 not spending any quality time with your kids.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, it's forgetting what is important at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing a podcast where they said, the biggest achievement in life is where you've got grown-up children and they still want to spend time with you. And I thought that is so true. I love going home and spending time with my parents. And they have their moments, we all do. We're like, it's probably time for me to go now because they want their space. But I still want to go back again, and they're still happy to see us. I think that's a really big achievement, isn't it? And like you say, this planning's allowing you to make sure you've got that quality time, doing quality things together.
The planning also gives you that opportunity to keep yourself grounded and to really give you that time to focus on what's important. Because especially then when you're getting older, it's, that eternal question of how long do you carry on working for? And even someone I was talking to at the weekend, I was at a funeral at the weekend, I was talking to someone, 75 and still working 5 days a week. What's the point? And, seriously, this guy was really very, very wealthy. I thought, if you can't spend, you can't enjoy your, what is the point? There needs to be a focus.
Yeah, it's because he's probably hasn't had anything else beyond work, and he hasn't found that other interest outside of work and enjoying the family that you've got. Yeah,
I've got clients like that, and it's the same. I think some people out there genuinely love work. They just love it, and they don't like the thought of not having a structure. I think you're right. You need something else to be focusing on. Usually, if you're that type of business, I think especially business owners who have always, it's tough being a business owner. You'll know.
Yeah, we're going to touch on
it. Once you've built a business and you've always had to wear so many hats, I can imagine it's very difficult to let go and actually not have something to focus on when you've been so in it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, I think letting go of the business, I find it really easy, but retiring, I think, it's all about the sense of purpose. If you don't have that sense of purpose and what you're going to be doing to keeping yourself busy, unfortunately for some clients, it just makes them become absolutely obsessed about their finances. And you just see a really unhealthy relationship between the client and their finances, and that's where then I think as a financial planner our job is to really help our clients really look at that and go into retirement in a far better space than just stopping. I know these days people don't just stop, but I think when you just stop on one day full-time work and not do this glide path into retirement, it's a very tricky thing to navigate, especially for men.
Yes.
So we've had a lot of men develop shingles within 12 months of retiring. Because they've lost that sense of purpose.
Yes. Yeah, I've got a few clients I can think of now who've taken a while to finally decide to retire, even though we've had the conversation from a financial perspective. They're secure and they always, they will be. But it's that big step, isn't it? I mean, I saw it with my father. He didn't retire until he was 71. And I remember the conversation he had with me, Emma, I'm finally giving up work. I'm not going to be able to help you financially now. And I'm thinking, Dad, I've had a career for quite a while now. I'm self-sufficient. It's okay. But he felt a responsibility. And he still struggles now, I think. He's 85 and not having the social side really struggles because he's quite a guy with a lot of banter and likes people.
And it could also be because of their identity as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. Say, you are the boss, you've reached that top and then you've stepped away and then who am I? And that maybe that pride that they had, I am the boss or whatever, that ego, and that's kind of gone, and maybe they feel their confidence has gone with it as well because their knowledge is now slipping away, regulations and all that is. So it's a huge transition for them, and it is a big step. And as financial planners, I do it, especially in a meeting, I'll talk about this to a client because it's a huge transition for them. And probably, when you're working, you're accumulating your wealth. And I don't know about yourself, but I see clients, they're struggling to spend their money because they're holding back because they don't want to see the pound signs falling. And it's like, well, why not? Why can you not start eating into your capital? This is what you've worked for. But it's just that mindset, that shifting in that mindset.
It's an insecurity, isn't it, that you're not working and bringing in income anymore. And I think when you've always had that for 40 years or whatever it is, it's quite scary, I can imagine. I think cash flow modelling helps, but it's a mind thing.
Yeah, but I think, for me, that's where it really, really does help and fit in, is getting clients to start to understand how much they can afford to be spending. And actually, that's where, for me, the cash flow modelling really enables the client to then take control, going, actually, if Helen said it's fine for me to do this, then actually they then believe you that it's, and they trust you to do that, because it's all about your relationship with the clients.
I think you're right. They just want that okay, don't they? We've done it. The figures are showing it as well.
They just want that reassurance.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
So, Helen, back to yourself. Stop talking about clients. So back to yourself. So you were Legal and General, and then eventually you then decided to establish your own financial advising practice. Why was that? What made you decide, right then, I'm going to set up by myself?
So what happened? So I'll talk you through very quickly the transition. I've been very fortunate. I've had a few really good mentors within my working career. So when I was at Legal and General, I had a compliance officer at the time. I was only there a very short space of time, 9 months, and I was one of the advisors there. And I remember my compliance officer said to me, "You're absolutely wasted doing the role that you're doing. You need to go and have a broader background in financial planning." And he said, "I think you'd be really good working as a trainee broker consultant, because you get a really good technical knowledge background." So I went to work at MPI, and MPI in Bristol, and it was back in the day when we had proper trainee schemes where you were actually taught that, you were taught how to become technically competent. You were taught how to sell. You were taught how to work with financial advisors. And actually, it's such a massive shame we don't have these schemes anymore, because people coming into the profession really, I think, are at a major disadvantage these days to when I joined. And when I was at MPI, there was a guy there called Dave Hughes, who was the top broker consultant. He was back in the day, this is probably before your time, when there was the Hargreaves Lansdowne did a mail shot on demutualisation, and my job as the trainee was to take Dave's car and to drive up to Bristol and bring back boxes of application forms, and then I had to process these application forms. It was crazy. Hargreaves Lansdowne made a lot of money in them days on the back of this. But Dave took me under his wing, as did one or two of the other guys, and they really taught me how to become what actually financial advisors valued in working with clients, and what they valued as a broker consultant. But again, it was the technical content. And then I went to work at Scott Am in London, and there were three guys there, Steve Purdy and Andy Mercer. And again, really good technical guys and really good broker consultants. But they really taught you what great looked like. And they were really good at giving you advice. And then when I was at Scott Am, I remember one of our colleagues in one of the other teams at Scott Am had a case, and it was a 1.6 million drawdown. This is back in, I'm going to say 2000, maybe 2001. So it was a 1.6 million drawdown, massive case. And the advisor had been asked to give their opinion on the advice they'd been given by the existing advisor. And to cut a long story short, the existing advisor was charging the client 7% commission on setting up this drawdown plan. And the guy was really risk averse, and he wasn't being recommended annuity. And so in 2001, the profession had become very much all about sales. It was all about what financial advisors earned, and we'd really lost the focus, going back to my childhood, of a financial advisor's job is to actually solve problems that enable clients to live their life and to give them that comfort that what they're advising them is the right thing to do. So I became really disillusioned with the profession. And so I spoke to actually all of the companies I was working with at the time as a broker consultant, but rather than going with them, decided actually I can do it myself, because there was an advisor who used to come and stay with us once a month, Mal Pritchard, who was from Manchester, was a very good friend of my husband's at the time. And Mal basically said to me, you can do it. You don't need to be going to work for someone else. And then I spoke to another advisor, Manesh Patel, who'd gone to work for another firm, and he was like, you can do it as well. So I stupidly set up my own firm straight from scratch rather than having joined someone else. Do I now look back and think it was the right decision? No, I don't. I think I would have been better off doing 2 years working for another advice firm first.
Why is that?
Why? I think I would have learned far more about running a financial advice firm and actually doing the job properly. Because at the time I was going in and doing lots of technical meetings with financial advisors, but I didn't have the client relationship. The financial advisor had the client relationship. So I probably spent the first 5 years of equanimity learning how to learning my craft, really learning about financial advice and having chance meetings, people, and finding out about financial planning, and learning how to become a business owner, and learning about the FCA. I did it the hard way. And I think actually going from broker consultant to running your own advice firm was actually not the right thing. And I think if I had my time again, I would have gone and I would have done a 2-year stint somewhere first before going to do it, because at that point I would know what I was doing.
Yeah. But you made it a success anyway.
I made it a success, and I had 2 children in between. I got divorced, and all of those things. So I think I made it hard for myself. Yes. But then once I was then understood what I was really doing and really learning how to network, but actually doing it yourself with having no clients and nothing to fall back on at all, I learned a lot of lessons about networking and how to develop clients and where to get clients from and what works and what doesn't. So I don't think I would have learned all of those lessons necessarily, or I may have. Yes. I don't know, it just depends. But the advice firms I was looking at joining, I would have been given clients, so I wouldn't have really learned how to do the hard graft. Yeah. And so going back to then zero of, then going back to nothing after a few years would be difficult again.
But probably because it was such a struggle, you value every opportunity you see, you probably just go for it. You embrace that rather than like a silver spoon. Oh, here you go. Here's your clients, and just kind of whatever. Yeah. You take every opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And then after a few years, I was really lucky that the way, that we structured things at home was that my husband's career was taking off, so I was in a position where I could afford not to take any money out of the business for 2 years, and that enabled me to really start building things up. Yeah. But I will often say to business owners, you've got to think about you're not going to be making profit in the first 2 or 3 years, because it's a lot of it at the startup cost. I look at my business plan that I wrote at the time to open a bank account, the naivety of it all. Yeah. But it's just incredible.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss as well.
I think so. And I think there's something to be said for having a struggle and actually having no option but to succeed. I think that can drive you in a lot of circumstances.
Absolutely.
But I think you did very well. But you've talked that, so as part of that journey, you went through a divorce.
Yes, so I had children, and I know that from a maternity leave perspective it doesn't really happen, but I remember with Reese, my first one, I technically had 6 months maternity leave, but he was the perfect child. If you've read the book, The Baby Whisperer, he was the angel child. I could actually plan meetings around his nap times. Yeah. And so 11 o'clock, I would put him down for a nap. I could actually have a meeting in the diary at 11:15 and know I'd be able to make it. So even though I had 6 months maternity leave, I didn't really, but it was more. The second time round, it was at the time then Burberry's had come out. Now thinking back, this is just bonkers, but I had a C-section, and I was actually reading emails in the recovery room.
Just Masona, doesn't surprise me.
And then in the 2 days I was in a hospital with him, or maybe a day and a half, I had to be in a hospital with him, that I was doing emails and things, in between nap times, because you just had your phone. And then the fatal mistake I did with him was after 3 weeks, I started answering emails and started booking in meetings, and clients took advantage of that. So I would honestly say that there needs to be a work-life balance, definitely around maternity leave, and you do need to take time to look after yourself, and you do need to be very careful as to which clients, if you are going to be answering emails or are going to be doing meetings, that they then there are boundaries put in place, because then clients were expecting you to be answering. And when you are juggling, and poor Lewis, he was quite a challenging baby, unlike Reese, the second one was definitely the challenging one. It was really difficult.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that you started meetings and everything at 3 weeks, because I did the same. So I've got 3 children, as you know. Yeah. With my first child, I was in a different firm, and I took the whole year off. And when I came back, and I've mentioned it in the previous podcast, I lost all confidence. There was no structure in place to bring me back into the firm. Pension legislation changed, the pension freedom rules, and my client bank was taken off me. It was just, and I had to start from scratch. It was just awful. And that on top of my, you touched on disillusion as to what this professional is all about, it made me think, right, then I'm stepping away from this. And in one of the podcasts we mentioned is, I think this happens quite often, and then you've got talented women leaving the industry because there's no structures in place. So when I went on maternity for the second time, I was with a different firm. The firm I'm still with, I'm now co-owner with Emma on it. And after 3 weeks of having the baby, I think because I was traumatised by what happened with my first child, I decided to start going on meetings, this, that and the other. And like you said, clients then started taking advantage. I also did it because you gain momentum, and you want to keep that momentum going. And I think also I felt there was no structure there to support me, whereby I don't have to be there, but there's someone there to keep that momentum going for me. So I think it was a big lesson learned there. So by the time I had my third child, still in the same firm, I made sure I knew right then, it's okay if I do go off for 6 months. Yeah. I've told the clients, look, this is what's happening. Everything is in order. If you do need help or any advice, there's other advisors in the firm. I'm still overseeing it, but I am there in the background. But it's unfortunately, I think a lot of women in this industry feel that they have to justify being off for maternity.
Yeah. Do you think, Helen, there are any particular things that companies should be putting in place to help that transition? Yeah,
well, ironically, I've got one female advisor working in my team, got another one joining. At some point, I'm sure there'll be one of the advisors will need to go on maternity leave. So I'm already thinking about how we can structure that so that the client bank can be preserved and looked after, but also allowing the mum to go off and have time with the baby, because you really do need that. But I think there needs to be the knowledge. It's really, really challenging, as you said. The knowledge is so difficult to keep your knowledge up to date, and I think keeping up your CPD, not necessarily from a PFS perspective, but certainly from your own perspective, being able to watch webinars and seminars and things when you're on maternity leave. I think these days it's going to be a lot easier for people, but also companies and employers need to really be having these honest conversations, upfront conversations with the staff member. I think there is so much taboo in the subjects of are you allowed to be talking about these things or not. But actually, if we don't talk about what someone is thinking of doing, you don't know how to look after the clients, and you don't know how to look after the member of staff. But also, as an employer, you also need to be thinking about working from home. We've got a member of staff in the office in London who's just announced she's pregnant, and I was speaking to the team leader, and I was saying, well, actually, when I was pregnant, I was so tired in my third trimester that being forced to get into the office by 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, it's just not needed. So, if they're a really good member of staff and they're hardworking, why can't they work from home for the whole of their third trimester? But have these conversations, and, do they just come in for one day, and actually have these conversations and make those adjustments, because we can work from home really well these days. I don't think so. I think it's having that adult conversation between that member of staff who's pregnant, but also the employer, to really look at how we can get this to work. Because again, I absolutely believe that the more longer maternity leave people have and the more they are away from work, the less likely they'll come back into the profession. And when you see the statistics of how many female advisors there are over the age of 40, but over the age of 40 and in London is staggeringly low. I think one of the statistics I saw a few years ago was that less than 4% of advisors in London were over 40 were female. Wow. Whereas if you look at it in the 20s and 30s, there's all a very equal mix. But actually, if you have a look at the number of advisors outside of London who are over the age of 40, the balance isn't too dissimilar to under the age of 40. Right. So I think we lose a lot of women outside of London to moving out because of children.
Yes, I think you're right.
So, and I think having that flexibility with regards being able to see clients and things is really important.
Yeah, it's funny, we've mentioned that, haven't we, in our podcast, that it has to be a normal conversation, or seen as normal to have these conversations in companies, because I think sometimes, especially as women, we're a bit nervous about rocking the boat and doing things that maybe...
You want to make a noise, you want to please.
But also there was one advisor that I had to bear in mind that whenever the kids had school plays or sports day, I'm there at the front on sports day cheering at the top of my voice. Whenever there's anything like that, I think it's really, really important that you go along. But I remember employing a guy once who had a young family, and he came from the finance background, now wanting to come into financial services, and he just wouldn't take the time off. And I wasn't expecting him to book holiday in. I was going, well, just go and see the girls in their school play. Go and see it. It's what... But he just couldn't get his head around this because he'd come from an environment where it wasn't permitted. And I think we need to get into that maternity, personally, should be a split thing.
Well, agree. Yeah, we've just been talking about that as well. Yeah, it's got to be a paternity, maternity, equal... Because we were saying, weren't we, that it could be a ripple effect. Still, I think a lot of women are seen as the carers with elderly parents and things. And actually, if men had some equality with paternity, that would have a ripple effect. And
even later, when their parents get older, it's always the woman. Generally, it's the woman that looks after their parents. Well, that will normalise. Actually, the man could step in. Just to move on, like we were talking about the divorce, and probably, as I know, that has given you expertise in the whole divorce proceedings, and then from your experience, you deal with a lot of clients that are going through the divorce process. Can you elaborate more on all that for us?
Yeah, of course. So from the divorce perspective, I know I've been quite open about this in the past, that most people are very surprised when I say this, that I was in very much what's called a coercive controlling relationship. At the time when I separated from my husband, the word coercive control just didn't exist. But I had absolutely zero confidence whatsoever, and the fact that I actually built up the confidence over a 4-year period to actually exit the relationship is quite remarkable, because that really, really held me back. And from a finance perspective, from that day onwards, it was all me. I had to pay for everything. I've had to fund everything to do with the children. So a lot of people look at me and they go, oh, you know, that you can't be doing all of these things. Actually, for me, it was really important where the kids went to school. It was really important that we stayed in London, and various things that I made a decision. But because of that, I had to be working in order to be building up the client bank, in order to be building up the revenue. So I do think where there's a will, there's a way, and you can either become a victim with everything that life deals with you. You know, my parents, the kind of relationship that I was in, or you just embrace it and go, how am I going to get through it? So referring back to Michelle Hoskin, I wrote myself a divorce plan with regards when I wanted my decree nice and my decree absolute to come through, and the key things, because my divorce I knew was going to be horrific. I lost just under a stone in weight from the 20th of November 2015. That was the decision. I woke up that day and I was out on the Saturday the 21st and said that's it. Between then and 20th of December, when I told my husband, I lost literally ounces off a stone in weight, just with the stress of knowing what was going to come. And then I actually planned, what is it that what could I be facing? Because what most people find when they're going through divorce is that you panic about money, you panic about the children, but actually for me, let's get the panic off the table and let's start planning. And that's what most people don't do with the divorce, is that things then crop up that they don't have control over. The more that you plan, what could be facing and what does this really mean, it then puts you in a far stronger position to then deal with these that are coming to you, and then there are fewer shocks and surprises that come to you. But I think that my experience of going through divorce, and actually the experience I've been dealing with the people I'd been working with in the past, has really enabled me to really help people going through the divorce process and really get them start planning for it properly. What you find is that I think most of the people I get involved with, everyone has got a story that's really, really unique. And some people, they tell you about it straight away in the first meeting and they've got the tears and the stains on their faces, and other people don't. They're really private, and it takes them a while to start telling you what's really gone on in that relationship. But with all of the clients that I've been working with, it's about dealing with them at that moment, getting them through the entire process. Average divorce takes about 18 months. My kind of cases take about 2 years because they're more complicated ones. But then the bigger piece of work is actually working with a person after the divorce, once you've got that decree absolute, and really getting them to build, to rebuild their lives and pick up the pieces. And as one family barrister said to me, that he sees the clients in the worst part of the process, because when you're going through the divorce, your behaviour isn't normal. Some people's behaviour is extreme, but your behaviour isn't normal and you are irrational. But then coming out of it the other side, I get to see that really nice part where you see that person at the lowest ebb in their life, and then in a few years' time, you see them, how would they advance every year in what they're happy to talk about. But you remind them about how far they've come on that journey, and that makes them feel really empowered as well. So I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, very important work. Do you use the cash flow modelling and your knowledge to build a case for those people that are coming out, in terms of the finances that they need?
Yeah, absolutely. Depends whether I'm being appointed by the family lawyers or whether I'm being appointed by the client. I won't work with the client unless they have a family lawyer in the background. But for me, the cash flow modelling is really important, because sometimes, on a few occasions, I've had the family lawyer contact me and go, this client is close to capitulation. And I'm not wanting to be sexist here, but the husband's just paying his his income into the joint bank account, and he's trying to get the wife to accept a really bad settlement, and she's at that capitulation stage. I'm just chucking it all in. And I was at that stage once with mine, with regards to just the mental capacity of being able to deal with the divorce and things. And so I can sometimes, with a financial planning, your job is to actually scare that person so much into oblivion. And I'm saying this in generic terms. You aren't, but you are giving them this is, if you give up now, this is what life means. Or if you carry on and listen to your family lawyer, then this is what potentially just actually sticking with it is really, really important. But it's really important that people go to the right family lawyers, because some family lawyers are really there to really be antagonistic with the divorce and are really looking at running up their own fees, whereas you have other family lawyers, the ones that I generally work with, who really want to get the client out of the process in the best format possible. And again, sometimes my job is to actually say to that client, you don't have to carry on fighting, you've got enough. And actually they need to understand what enough means.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think a lot of people don't understand a lot of the job we do. It's not just the figures. It's actually the counselling, the being a person, somebody to, shoulder to cry on, reading situations well. You've got that experience yourself through your divorce. I think a lot of people out there just don't really understand that we have all of that side to us as well.
We take a lot of the emotional load at times, and we've mentioned it in previous podcasts to say that I've had situations where a client has told me they're terminal and they're worried about the wife, the children, or whatever, and you're emotionally drained after a meeting, and people don't realise we have to take that on.
But it's some of the most rewarding parts, I find. It's really good setting someone up financially, but actually when you feel you've come out of a meeting and made a difference emotionally, and just giving them a bit of I've got it off my shoulders, at least just even for the hour. I think that's the bit for me. I find that really
when they say,
satisfying.
I feel better after speaking to you. Great, that's the goal. So with your company, there was a point where you decided, right then, I am going to sell. And you sold it to a firm which you now are employed by.
Yes, correct.
A couple of questions on that. What was the reason for you to deciding to sell? And do you think that was the best decision for yourself?
Yeah, so I probably... It wasn't really planned, although it probably was planned but not planned. So I've always worked historically with business owners. I've always told them you've got to plan for the exit, and you've got to have a 10-year plan. 5 years would be 3 years, which is your actual exit, 2 years when you're courting and finding someone to buy you, and then the 5 years beforehand to get your business up to shape if it isn't already there. And that's the rough 10-year plan. And I'd ready for a number of years, because the kind of work that I was doing with the business owners, always wanting to make sure that if the right offer came along and if the right thing came across the table, that I would always be in a position that actually I would think about it, because I'd certainly seen business owners who had decided not to sell, and then they'd missed that opportunity, and then they'd actually not been able to end up not selling. So I'd always thought, so always have the business in that place, not that I want to sell, but just in case. And then I'd been helping some other people as a NED role, and had been introduced at the company, and then I was actually in the process of looking to see how I was going to expand Equanimity, because I wasn't particularly looking to sell. So I was in the process of, do I buy another firm? And that was really getting me to really look at, on the planning side, that I was going to have to expand the management side of the business in order, you've got to go outwards in order to go upwards. And at that point, I was approached by another company who are now Atomos, and they were being bought out from Sanlam, and they were looking at turning Atomos into a financial planning business. And everything that JP, who's the chief exec, and all of the exco members that I spoke to within my 5 months of due diligence before going into our due diligence phase that I went through, they were all wanting to achieve out of Atomos where I was wanting to achieve out of Equanimity. But they also wanted me to be part of that journey, to also be making that change, because I wasn't ready to hang up my boots from the impact that I can make within financial planning services. So I wasn't looking to retire. I wasn't looking to go, I'll just become another advisor. So it had to be the right thing. And it was just the right fit. And it really was the right fit for me with where we were within the career. And, you know, we completed on the 1st of September 23. And ironically, from then on, I never once looked at the company bank account, which is just bonkers, you know, for someone who looks at the company bank account for nearly 20 years. That was an incredible thing to never have to do. You know, we were a really successful business. It wasn't about making sure that we had enough money in the bank account. Every day without fail, I would be looking at the business bank account. It was just habit. First job of the day, bank account. And, you know, I never did that. But I found that joining Atomos, I have an amazing boss. And I have to say, a woman joining a company, it is really daunting, because especially when, you know, you've been doing things your own way. One of the things I was really worried about was female joining a firm. You know, yes, there's men, but there are a lot of women in Atomos. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of blokes.
More men.
There's a lot of blokes. And secondly, a menopausal woman actually going through a big career change. That is actually really, really scary. But I have to say, I have a really, really good boss who, you know, he is technically my boss. He's just great. And so I have to say, and I have this amazing team, Ian, Dawn, amazing team, the financial planners we have. We're a really great company. We're a really great team. So I do feel like I've landed on my feet. Has it been easy? Absolutely not. Merging your business with someone else is flipping hard works. I've never worked so hard in all my life. But it has been a far easier transition than I was expecting it to be.
God, you don't hear that very often from business owners who are then having to hand over the reins a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, but I think handing over the reins, but because we're going through a lot of change as well, I'm instrumental in those changes. So that's why I'm saying I was handing over the reins, but it doesn't feel like I've let go, because I am helping with all of those changes. I definitely wasn't ready to be handing fully over. That kind
so
of
those
stuff.
decisions, those big decisions, you can still make those.
Well, I'm involved in the decision-making process, and my voice is very vocal.
It's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing.
So what is, this probably be one of the last questions is, what is your end goal then, Helen? What are you now working towards? Have you probably in your plan, in your goal, you know, your 30-year plan that you said, you've got a goal as to when you want to retire, but have you got a vision of where you want to be before you hit that point? Yeah,
do you know what? This is a really interesting question, and I think it's the most common question I've been asked in the last, year and a half since selling Equanimity. I genuinely thought that when I was joining Atomos, the next role would be that I would be, wanting to be going into the managing director, CEO kind of role. I genuinely don't know whether that is the right thing for me, because what I'm really passionate about is helping clients and helping staff members, and actually really making change within the financial planning profession to really help deliver and leaving the profession in a better place than when I started. And I don't know whether running a larger financial planning business will actually tick all of those boxes. That if what we can do within Atomos is really enable my career to be ticking the box where I still have some form of client contact, I still have my clients, but also really help and shape the face of advice. That for me is something that I'm really passionate about. So whether it's becoming mentors and mentoring other business owners, I just don't know. I think what we have to do is to get through. We've gone through 12 months of transition within clients, but I would probably say we've got another 6 months for things to really properly settle down and for the new ways of working within Atomos to be implemented, and then probably a 12-month period after that, really looking at where it goes to from there. It might be that I, move into the managing director type role, but I care so much about making a difference that I don't know if that is enough.
Yeah, I feel like it might be a better position elsewhere to be able to do that. Yeah. And obviously we've got lots of listeners and viewers on the podcast. Are there any top tips that you would give for people listening today in terms of progressing in a career? Any women out there that are thinking of getting into finance, financial planning?
So I would definitely say top tip, get your exams done as quickly as you can. The quicker you get exams done, the more technical that you have those exams, is just a better place for the profession. For women specifically, if the firm that you are at is not treating you in the way that you want to be treated, there are so many female-friendly firms out there. Don't just stick with second best. And I'll say this to to guys as well. There are fun. The profession is in such a period of change where if you want to be working in a company that is very much sales driven and very much just financial advice and churning things out, that's fine. But there are better ways of doing it, and there are more rewarding ways of doing it. So actually training to become coaches, really thinking about the end goal for the client. And then I think the final thing, I know there's only going to be one, especially when you're financial planning, a lot of people go on training courses and they're told, ask these questions. If you don't know how to deal with an answer, don't ask the question in the first place. Because so many people will ask a question and then don't, and then move on. Seriously, you have to react to that question. And so I think that's my big thing, is if you're going to be going on these courses, really drill down to what you're going to do with the answer to that question in the first place.
Some great tips.
Thank you very much.
It's been brilliant. So thank you very much for joining the Wealth and Women podcast today. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation that we had with Helen and got some top tips to take away. Please find us on the PFS YouTube channel or LinkedIn.